Welcome to Business Like a Mother, the podcast for moms in business by moms in business. Hey, I'm Jenn Morris, here to help you amplify your voice, grow your brand, blaze your trail, and navigate the beautiful chaos of motherhood and entrepreneurship. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Business Like a Mother podcast. I'm Jenn Morris, your host, and today we are going to dive into finding ways to get creative and express yourself when you are in the throes of motherhood. This is a conversation really deep to my soul because I have an acting background, and when I had kids, I had to put a lot of those things on pause, and over the last couple of years have found ways to bring those parts of me back, and it has been like returning back to me, which has been really important. So I'm excited to have my dear friend, Jenn Todling, joining me for this conversation. And I think this is really a full circle moment for us, Jenn, because we met 10 years ago at an event in New York City, and you were there doing one of your passions. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I was helping a friend start his wedding dance company, and I was there as the bridal dance model. And so I was dancing, and you were in your nutrition coaching, and you came up and offered me a smoothie. And I had this dance coaching workshop I was advertising that I wasn't really doing yet, but I had this idea about, and you followed up with me afterwards, and sort of the rest is history. So I was sort of in my ballroom dance era of New York City.
Yeah, we didn't have kids yet. Neither one of us were married yet. I was about to be, but it is wild. But I think one of those things of like the power of networking and following up and creating relationships with people. I mean, never did I ever think that we would be now living within, 15 minutes of each other and
I know.
and like doing so much collaboration together. So it is wild. But I think some people tend to brush off these sort of, little short experiences with people and dismiss them. And I think sometimes that's where like the real gold lies, actually, if you stay in touch. So
Absolutely.
I love that. I love that. So you had quite a journey from corporate America and completely sort of divorcing yourself from creative expression to pivoting pretty big time into leaving a 20-year corporate career, venturing out into the entrepreneurial world, and also writing a memoir, getting back into dance throughout this whole process. So give us the short story version here. Everyone else can read the book, which we'll talk about. So give us the short version before we really dig into the topic close at hand here.
Yeah. So I was always a creative person growing up. I was a ballet dancer. I wrote, I did journals. I was the editor of my yearbook. So I had a lot of creative outlets. I lost that during my 20s, and you can read about that in my book as to why, but I lost access to that, I would say. And so for a decade, I didn't access that part of myself. And so when I moved to New York City, it was sort of this renaissance moment for me. I had lived a very closed life for 10 years, and I was very hungry for new experiences. And so I just opened myself up to everything. Like I took writing classes, I took Italian classes, I took Portuguese classes, I started dance. And when I reconnected with dance and I started a new passion with ballroom dance, it was like this part of me opened up that I sort of forgot was there. And I was 19 again, and it's sort of like that light I had, I reconnected with that. And I was doing that, but this was pre-kids, but I was in a very demanding corporate career that I was integrating sort of in my nights and weekends. And as I did that, I found that I actually became better at my job. And I'm happy to share stories too, as we talk about how do you do that when you add kids into the mix, because I also, during the pandemic had some experiences with that as well. But as I started to unleash sort of this creative side of me, it really helped really just bring me back to myself, to be honest, just like you sort of said with acting. And now that you're sort of inviting some of those creative outlets again, we are not meant to be solely like productive and analytical and in this sort of, I don't know, achievement focused space, right? We're intended to be whole people. And part of that is we have creative needs, and those look different for each of us. So that was sort of my journey to discover that, and now I'm sort of on this mission to help everybody invite some aspect of that back into their life, because I think, and I try and frame it too as it helps you with your job, because sometimes we manage guilt around making time for it. And so I would argue it's not just this nice to have, it actually is essential if you want to be your best in whatever it is that you're doing. There's my soapbox.
Yeah,
Like,
I know. I love that because I think we hear so much about like self-care for moms, right? Self-care for moms, and it's taking a walk, working out, getting a babysitter, taking a bubble bath, And I think sometimes we hear it so much that we have sort of like we roll our eyes at it a little bit because we're also like, is this possible? But we don't often hear, but then when we think about something like taking a dance class or an arts and crafts class or picking up going back to pottery or choir. That was a big thing for me. That feels like it's a hobby, and hobbies take you away from being productive. And so it's not self care. We separate these two, but I think I would say probably the same for you of like my creative pursuits, going to choir for 2 hours once a week is mental health care for me. So it is creativity and it absolutely helps me in parts of my business, but it's also like mental health. So can you speak to that a little bit?
yeah, and I like how you reframed that, because I do think self-care feels, I don't know, there's just something associated with that word, right? That doesn't resonate as much, but the mental health piece is, as moms in particular, right, how we show up as humans is going to impact how we parent, right, and how our kids grow up in the world. And so we do need to be in a space, if we can, as much as possible, to support our mental health and to be our best energy to stay emotionally regulated, right? And so being able to support ourselves creatively, and it doesn't have to be like, we do choir together. So 2 hours once a week, that is a big commitment, right? It's not a small commitment, but we both carve out the time and we have partners that are able to support us in that. And I know that is a time that we're also saying that our needs matter. That is something that I've really worked hard on as a mom, is modeling that my needs matter too. And so
Mm.
even if it's, my daughter's a ballet class and it's at the gym, and the gym is literally next door to the ballet class, and I tell her I'm going to work out for an hour, she throws guilt trips my way, like, please just sit in the chair and wait for me. But I have to be very diligent and say my needs matter too, because I know I have to support my own emotional regulation. It's really hard as a parent. And so if exercise does that for you, wonderful. I mean, we all need that, but creativity and outlets also can help support us in that mental health piece, because they're nourishing us in a different way. So it's sort of like the soul food, right? Like you have to feed your
Yeah.
soul too, so you can give the way you need and want.
Yeah, I love that because I think we have so much of this like mom guilt that society puts on us and then we also put on ourselves. And I've also gotten really good at saying to my girls, and they've been better now because I just keep repeating it. But there were times over the last year and a half when I was leaving to go to choir, it was like this whole thing, very dramatic. And at first I would kind of be like, oh, but it's just 2 hours. I'll be home before bedtime and I'd be rushing home and da da da. And then it sort of turned into like, you know how you guys need time with your friends and your buddies, and sometimes you need time with your tablets and with your TV to unwind on Friday after school. That's what this is for mom. Like mom used to do all sorts of shows and act and sing like every night of the week. And I don't do that anymore because you are the my priority, but this is also a priority for me. And just like spending time with your friends and, seeing your grandparents, they don't always get it. And they might still have a guilt trip, but it is modeling. And I think if we want to change the paradigm around like moms putting ourselves last, we have to lead by example.
Yeah, and I think that has helped me. It doesn't mean because I've had that same issue where my daughter is at my ankle, right? Don't go to choir, and I have to go to choir. And I do, like, for me, it's important to make it back by bedtime, and so I prioritize that. So I'm not always going out then on the happy hour afterwards, right? So that's a choice that I make
Mhm.
intentionally. But I do tell myself, like, I want my daughter, when she's a mom, if she chooses to be a mom, to know that it's okay to value herself and her time and her passions as a human. And I think that runs sometimes counter to what we're told as a society or we feel. And so we have to be intentional with it. And it can look a lot of different ways, right? It can look like, for me, sometimes it was 10-minute increments, right? Like here's a 10-minute chunk of time that I can write a little scene. And so it doesn't have to be these big, giant commitments. They can show up in smaller ways. And so I think it's just recognizing that we need that time too for ourselves, and our kids will benefit from us taking that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about kids benefiting, but also like as business owners, it also benefits your business to have
Yep.
other hobbies, other creative expressions. I know for me, I would put myself in these places where I'm like, if I'm going to read, I can only read personal development books, money mindset books, business development books. It was the story I was telling myself. So, and then I like didn't want to read those books at 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night or whenever, or on a beach. Well, I mean, rarely would I like, we don't go to the beach that often yet. Goals. But, on vacation, on a plane, I would always bring the book. And then I was like, I don't want to, this is not what I want to be consuming right now in my few minutes of downtime. So about 2 years ago, I was like, what F this? Like, I used to read a ton of fiction as a kid and as a young adult, and I loved it. I loved it. And it encouraged my imagination, but I was not valuing my imagination. So because I wasn't valuing it, I was only valuing productivity and growing my business. So I had that kind of moment of being like, this is dumb. Like,
Yeah.
stop it. So now I listen to, in some weeks, I listen to like 2 or 3 fiction audiobooks, depending on the week. Other times I get through one a month. Like right now I'm on a slower cycle. It's a longer book. But can I point to like I made more money in my business this month because I listened to no, not necessarily, but it makes me like a happier person.
Yeah.
So how has this shown up for you? Like when you moved to New York City, you discovered a dance studio, you finally like got the nerve to go in and start
Yeah.
taking classes again, knowing you were still in corporate America at this point, but was that kind of the beginning of I don't know how many years it was, but like of a shift for you, whereby bringing in this creativity, it started to open your eyes to other possibilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And as I started to learn more, and I'm a neuroscience nerd, like I like to understand the science behind it. As I started to understand more, I started to realize that there are different networks in your brain that get activated when you're doing things, right? When you're crossing off the to-do list. But there's another part of your brain, which is where the insight comes in, the creativity, some of the imagination, connecting the dots, right? Which is
Mhm.
really important in a lot of the business area and domain that isn't activated is not cannot be activated because one is on or off at the same time when you're just in that motion of productivity. And so I didn't know that when I was starting to experience this, but I started to feel, and I was in audit. So a lot of my job was very much in the details, but to be a good auditor, you had to also step away and you had to like sleep on it and sort of see like what are those ideas that come to you on a walk or while you're driving or in the shower, because you have to connect like what am I missing? And you can't do that when you're in the weeds, right? You have to step back. And as I started to explore my creative passions more, those dots started to connect better for me because I was opening that up. And one really poignant example actually was years later, and now I had a 2 year old in the pandemic. Everything turned virtual, and I was living in DC at the time, and my hip hop teacher in New York started teaching virtual classes. And so I was like, I am going to do a Zoom, an hour and a half on a Saturday and busy season, right? Where I'm working like 60 hours a week and my daughter's floating around in the background. And that just trying to learn choreography and trying to like, I mean, hip hop is not a natural dance for me, but it's fun. And I was like, wow, actually, now I'm going back to my audit work and things are making more sense and I'm opening up more ideas. And so that was really pivotal for me. And then once I learned more about the neuroscience, it was like, oh, actually, this is productive in a different way. And so I try and just share that, especially for people that are very achievement focused, that this is a form of productivity. It just looks different, it doesn't feel as tangible, but we're not accessing it when we're always just in that to do, to do, to do, to do. So we're actually only limiting our ability to be successful. And so that, not that had to be the purpose for it, it was just fun. But it also had that benefit that I think is important just to realize it can be a really big business asset for us and whatever your business is.
So what would your advice be to somebody listening to this who's maybe feeling like I used to do something that really brought me joy, or I'm curious about something else, but I'm feeling so overwhelmed right now that I can't even think about adding something else in or taking time away from my kids because I'm already not spending as much time with them, but also knowing that it's time and something needs to shift.
Yeah, I mean, my advice is usually start small because I think that, especially when we're overwhelmed. And so that's where I just invite what would it look like to add 10 minutes a day, a week, like pick a time period, something small to just explore something for fun that you used to do or that you're curious about, like you said, right? So if you used to paint as a kid, you like to do chalk, right? It could even be something you integrate with your child. You like to color, right? There's lots of ways to do that, but how can you invite just even 10 minutes where maybe you're not on your phone or you're not focused on multitasking. It's great if you can do it while you have childcare, right? So can you carve out 10 minutes over lunch or whatever your schedule looks like so that it can really just be in service of you? But I think those small moments add up. And then you can sort of see, okay, this is something that's fueling me, or maybe it did when I was younger, but now it doesn't. So I want to try something else, right? So I'm a big fan of also experimenting to see, maybe it's shifted and our brain is always growing and learning, but we need novelty. So introducing new things is good for the brain. So even if it like singing, I am not a singer, as you see, but I'm in the choir and I'm learning. I've never sung in parts before. And I'm like, this is very interesting for me, but it's fun, right? I'm not dancing weekly at the same way, but I'm using my brain in a different way and I'm having fun with it. So I would just say start small and experiment.
I think that's great advice. And I like what you said about choir. First of all, you are a singer. I'm going to reflect that back to you. But I do think as we get older, we do adapt a more like rigid mindset of, well, I'm too old to learn this, or I'm
Yeah.
too old. My oldest is taking piano lessons right now. And so while I don't have the bandwidth to like sit down and learn an instrument that I always wish I had really learned, I do when we sit down to practice at home, I sit down and I sort of like play with her. And I'm like, okay, I am kind of picking this up, Now, am I going to like master the piano? I don't know. But it has been something of like, what if I take lessons once a week and practice 20 minutes a week? I could probably pick this up a little bit faster than I'm giving myself credit for. And
Yeah.
it's just releasing the, I think, mindset we have of it has to be right. And if it's not something that we're going to excel at, it's like a waste of time. And
Yeah, and
yeah,
I mean, I've coached a lot of women, some that have kids, some that don't, that feel that way, right? Like, well, what if I invest in my Pure Barre, do I need to become certified as an instructor for it to be worth my time? And I'm like, what if you
right,
just did it for fun?
right.
We don't have to have the certificate. But what I love about what you just said is you can also have a family conversation around this. And like my husband and I and daughter once had this conversation because he's always wanted to learn piano. And I was like, why don't the two of you go do piano lessons at the same time and you each have your instructors? And so it can also be a family conversation of what creative outlets do we each want to pursue this year and how can we support each other in that? And then it's not just like, hey, mom is going doing her thing, right? It's like as a family, we value supporting each other in that way and invite a conversation around it.
Such good advice. Such good advice. I think we often think we have to make these decisions like alone in a vacuum, and inviting in other people to kind of conspire with can
Yeah,
actually lead to more energy and excitement, and having actually realizing that potentially can be cheering you on. Like, oh yeah, you should do
exactly.
that. Instead of, I think sometimes we're like, oh, they're gonna just think like, oh, mom wants to do something for herself, like can't do that. But what if the opposite was true? So speaking of creative endeavors, you have a book coming out,
Yay.
your memoir, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet. Got a copy right here. Tell us a little bit about just the process of writing a very deeply personal story. And if someone's here listening who maybe is thinking about, writing as a creative pursuit, what your advice would be to them.
Yeah, I mean, this is a story I've always wanted to share. I was 10 years away from it when I wrote it, which I think I needed the distance so that I could connect some dots and I was ready to share it little less emotionally charged than when I was living it. And something happened. I think the pandemic was just a shift for a lot of us of like, what are those important things we want to pursue? And I just had this moment of clarity. And it was in conversation with a coach of, you have like what it takes to be a best-selling author. Like someone just said that. And I was like, you know what? You're right. I sort of forgot that I was a writer. I forgot. And it shifted something in me. And so my husband went to Brazil to visit his family for a week. I kept my daughter in preschool and I just gave myself a staycation and I just started writing. And I always thought it was going to be a leadership book, right? Like, here's my how to for blah, 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 blah. But I gave myself permission to just have fun and play and write in scenes, which is more like writing a novel. And it was hilarious. Like some of the adventures and misadventures, I was cracking myself up. And I was like, this is so much fun. And I just allowed myself to indulge. And then I did add some structure and I started a program to give me some accountability. And it was a 6-month writing program. And by the end of that year, I had my first messy draft. And I invited my husband or asked his support because there were a couple times where I need to just write because I feel this like sprint. I was very much a sprint, and then it was 10-minute increments where I could fit it in. And so there were a couple moments I just was like, I need you to just be the parent and I need to hide myself away and finish this. But most of it was written in 10, 20 minutes, handwritten, longhand on a journal. And then I would like type it up later. And so it just was squeezing it in. And so my advice is like, our stories do matter. And even if it's just for you, the process of writing it down, like write for you. And that makes the best writing anyway. And as a memoir, like there's a lot of layers you have to unpack and vulnerability that, I'm still yet to experience because it's not fully out. But you don't have to publish it for it to mean something, right? But I think there's just something really cathartic about just allowing ourselves to share our life and experiences, and even if it's just for us.
Jenn's debut memoir, Dancing on My Own 2 Feet, published by Simon & Schuster, is officially out. And I'm super excited to share that you can head over to the show notes of this episode and look for the information so you can grab your copy of this inspiring, very brave, and fiercely vulnerable story. Thanks for tuning in to Business Like a Mother. If you love this episode, do me a favor and make sure to hit subscribe so you never miss a moment. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave a review. It helps other moms in business find the show and join this amazing community. Because we are not meant to do motherhood or business alone. Want more? Head to renegademotherhood.com for resources, workshops, and events designed just for moms like you. Until next time, keep growing your business, raising your voice, and blazing your trail like a mother.